Welcome, everyone, to the Kenya Wantam Notam Movement, or KWM, Deep Dive.
It's great to be here.
Today, we are taking a really comprehensive look at a stack of some very compelling source material. It's all focused on an urgent national conversation happening right now.
That's right. It's about the movement for change, and specifically the mission for Kenya's Gen Z to, well, reclaim their power and fundamentally reshape the nation's entire political structure.
And this isn't just, standard political commentary. What we have here feels different.
It really is. It feels more like a meticulously documented critique of decades of political failure, followed by a very detailed, very strategic blueprint for the youth.
So our mission today is to thoroughly unpack this central argument. We need to look at the diagnosis of failure, the demonstration of youth power, and then the specific actions required to build a new future.
A future outside the confines of the current and, as the source material argues, corrupted system.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We often hear political narratives framed as, a simple deadlock between parties, but this material just rejects that simplicity.
It does. It frames the current situation not just as a failure of governance, which it is, but as a critical crisis of courage and of sustained strategic action on the part of those who are actually seeking genuine transformation.
What's really interesting to me is the immediate pivot from this incredibly intense criticism to actionable strategy.
Exactly. The source insists that the tools and the energy for change exist right now, today.
But to understand the pathway forward, it seems we first have to deeply internalize the weight of the past.
We have to. And that burden, that weight, is carried by what the material calls the old guard.
Let's start right there then. The failed promise, the legacy of this old guard.
A good place to start.
The analysis points to some very sobering facts about political longevity. It singles out specific politicians, Kalonzo, Gachagua, Matiangi, Muturi, Wamalwa, as concrete examples of this entrenched old guard. So what does the timeline of their continuous political service actually reveal?
Well, it reveals a persistence that is, frankly, astonishing. The sources document that some of these individuals have been continuously occupying significant high-level government roles.
We're talking ministerial positions, high-level parliamentary seats.
Precisely. And they've been doing it since as far back as the 1980s.
The 1980s.
Yes. So when you actually tally that up, we're talking about figures who have been drawing government salaries, benefits, and allowances for 40 years.
40 years. In some cases, that stretches across the majority of the entire post-independence era.
It does. It suggests a political class that has remained fixtures, almost like furniture, regardless of which party is formally in power.
You would think that 40 years of public service should translate into some foundational, undeniable national development.
You would hope so.
But the material challenges us, and you, the listener, to look beyond the titles and ask the crucial, difficult question. What have these decades of tenure actually delivered to the average Kenyan citizen?
And the assessment provided by these sources is, well, it's brutally honest. They point to what they label zero accomplishments.
Zero. That's a strong claim.
A very strong claim. But they argue it's in terms of genuine, impactful development that improves the daily life of their constituents. And the evidence of this failure, they say, isn't abstract. It's physical. It's pervasive across the entire country.
Okay, give us some tangible details on those real-world symptoms of governance failure the sources cite. What does this look like on the ground?
It's what people see every day. We are talking about schools crumbling because maintenance budgets vanished years ago. They often become, actual health hazards for the students inside them.
They're not just underfunded, but physically falling apart.
Exactly. And then you travel through entire regions lacking basic, reliable, clean water systems. This forces whole populations to rely on unsafe, distant sources.
Things we take for granted.
Absolutely. Then there are the hospitals. The sources say they consistently lack the most basic supplies. We're not just talking about specialized equipment, but simple medicines, adequate staffing, the fundamentals.
And what about commerce? Getting around.
That's another key point. Roads. They often become completely impassable during rainy seasons, which effectively isolates entire communities and markets.
So the source argues that the state of affairs isn't due to poverty.
No, not at all. It's due to prioritized self-interest over mandated public duty.
This pattern of neglect seems intrinsically tied to what the sources call the perpetual playbook of the old guard.
Yes, the playbook.
It says they're present only during campaign season.
Precisely. It's like clockwork. They suddenly materialize every 5 years, often flying in using the same tired slogans.
Give us another chance.
We will bring development.
Yeah.
They promise jobs, infrastructure, and radical transformation.
And the sources note they sometimes reuse the exact same unfulfilled speeches from the previous election cycle.
They do. But the crucial defining element of this playbook is what happens immediately after the election.
They vanish.
They become completely inaccessible. They insulate themselves behind layers of security and bureaucracy until the electoral cycle demands they come back out again.
So what are they doing during that 5-year period of invisibility? The sources offer a definition of the political game that they say has been played since 1963. They explicitly define it as the vision of looting.
This is where the analysis becomes surgical. The source materials define the core objective of securing political office in Kenya not as public service, but as a systematic, institutionalized business venture.
A business venture aimed solely at self-enrichment.
That's the argument. The priorities are clearly transactional. Get elected, rapidly accumulate personal wealth, secure high-level, lucrative government positions for your immediate family and close associates.
And use public funds to construct elaborate personal estates while the very constituents who elected you are struggling for basic amenities.
Yes. Public office, in this model, is simply the means to wealth extraction. Nothing more.
Let's elaborate on the specifics of this looting methodology, because understanding the mechanism is key to understanding the depth of the corruption. How does development money just disappear?
Well, according to the sources, it rarely vanishes by accident.
Yeah.
It's diverted through a very structured kind of fraud.
So a new project is announced. A hospital wing, a highway.
Right. And it's announced with a budget that is heavily inflated from the very beginning.
Why the inflation?
Because that inflation is necessary to accommodate the massive built-in kickbacks. The report cited suggests these are often 30% to 40% of the total project costs.
30 to 40%.
And that's taken by politicians and officials before any substantive work even begins.
And the mechanism for sort of legalizing this funneling of money is often the public tendering process.
Absolutely. It's deeply compromised. Tenders are routinely awarded not through transparent, competitive bidding to the most qualified constructors.
Directly to cronies.
Exactly. These cronies operate shell companies or firms that were hastily registered just weeks before the contract is signed, often owned by family members, close associates, or political financiers.
The sources call them phantom suppliers or ghost projects.
They do, and they stress that every single transaction becomes a cash extraction mechanism. The imagery used is of funds just falling directly into a deep pocket.
So it's not just big projects. The system is rigged all the way down.
All the way down. Through ghost workers on payrolls, inflated supply costs, budget manipulation. It's all designed to ensure continuous private enrichment.
So the political structure is systematically designed, from the highest office down to local development projects, to ensure wealth flows upward.
Which explains why you see zero accomplishments for the people at the base, while the old guard grows exponentially wealthier. Their only true vision, as the source states, revolves around their personal balance sheets and land acquisition.
This exhaustive diagnosis of systemic failure, it really provides the crucial context for why the recent youth movement was so significant.
It does. The widespread frustration over these decades of broken promises served as the perfect catalyst for what came next.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's revisit the events of June 25th. The source material frames this date as a spectacular real-time demonstration of what Gen Z can achieve when they mobilize and unite.
It was an overwhelming display of genuine people power.
Yeah.
I mean, streets across major urban centers were just filled with young voices.
And importantly, they weren't organized by traditional party structures?
No, nor were they mobilized based on tribal alliances. This was organic. It was driven by digital coordination and a shared outrage over economic injustice.
The sheer scale, the coordination, and the speed of the mobilization, the source says it terrified the ruling establishment.
And the government's reaction really confirms the magnitude of the threat they perceived.
Their response wasn't consultative, was it?
It was the opposite, immediate and reactionary. We saw widespread deployment of police force, mass arrests of known and suspected organizers.
And critically, the strategic shutting down of internet access in key protest areas.
Right. That heavy-handed response was a direct acknowledgement that Gen Z had organized a movement that bypassed the traditional sources of political control.
The party bosses, the tribal elders, the state media.
All of them. The youth had demonstrated that they could organize and act independently of the status quo.
So the power was authentic, it was unified, and crucially, it was non-tribal and non-partisan. However, The source material identifies a crucial mistake, a moment when that fire dimmed.
And this is identified as the critical strategic error. The analysis argues that the movement's power dimmed at the exact moment Gen Z allowed the very old guard politicians to step in.
The lifetime beneficiaries of the broken system we just detailed.
The very same people they tried to co-opt the momentum. These career politicians suddenly showed up to march alongside the youth, adopting the slogans. But their presence instantly tainted the movement with the politics of the past.
Why was that considered such a devastating strategic error, a surrendering of moral authority?
Because the moment the established politicians inserted themselves, the entire narrative immediately shifted.
How so?
It moved from being a pure citizen demand for systemic overhaul, which is terrifying to the establishment, to being categorized as just another opposition political protest.
So it was contained, put in a box they understood.
Exactly. By allowing their involvement, the youth inadvertently endorsed the illusion that change could be achieved through the same political machinery that created the problem in the first place.
And the source insists the old guard's only goal was to, what? Harvest the energy for their own campaign.
For their own electoral campaigns, yes.
Yeah.
Not to dismantle the corrupt system they had spent decades building and benefiting from.
So the power hasn't been extinguished, it was simply misdirected.
That's the key takeaway. The analysis emphasizes that the potential and the unity demonstrated that day still exist. They just need to be reignited and strategically directed away from co-option and towards independent action.
The uniqueness of that non-partisan, non-tribal unity is the most terrifying asset Gen Z holds.
It is. And the strategic lesson is that this moral authority must be fiercely protected. Any involvement by the old guard must be seen as an immediate risk to the movement's integrity.
To truly gauge the magnitude of the current struggle, we have to recognize that this fight for economic justice, it's a historical relay race.
That's a great way to put it.
Section 4 of the sources links Gen Z's struggle directly back to historical imperatives, reminding us that the fight for sovereignty and justice in Kenya has always been driven by young, courageous leaders.
This historical grounding is absolutely vital. The sources highlight that the very foundation of the Kenyan nation and the subsequent challenge to its early corruption rested on the shoulders of youth who sacrificed everything.
Their careers, their freedom,
and ultimately their lives. We have to talk about figures like J.M. Kariuki.
Kariuki became an MP for Nyandarua North at just 36 years old. What was it about his policy ideas that made him such a threat to the elites of the time?
Kariuki was a fiery populist. He was dedicated to economic equality and land reform, which was the most volatile issue in early post-independence Kenya.
And he was very outspoken.
Famously so. He warned that Kenya risked becoming a nation of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. He spoke fiercely against the new black Kenyan elites who were simply adopting the old colonial system of land ownership for themselves.
And his ability to mobilize the poor, his relentless honesty.
It led directly to his assassination in 1975. He was eliminated because his policy agenda challenged the fundamental architecture of the ruling class's wealth.
And the sources compel us to remember Tom Mboya, who achieved national prominence even earlier.
Mboya was Minister for Labor at the astonishing age of 29. He was a highly educated modern thinker who championed equitable resource distribution.
He had a global vision, didn't he?
He did. He wanted international relationships designed to genuinely benefit ordinary Kenyans, not just the elite. And his life was cut short when he was assassinated at 38.
So both Mboya and Kariuki epitomize the antithesis of the looting culture.
Completely. They were young, highly effective visionaries dedicated to building a fair Kenya, which is precisely why the entrenched interests eliminated them so quickly and decisively.
But perhaps the most profound example of historical debt and subsequent betrayal detailed in the sources relates to General Dedan Kimathi.
His story is a painful metaphor for how Kenya has treated its real heroes.
So for our listeners, remind us, Kimathi was a leader in the armed wing of the Mau Mau struggle in the 1950s.
He is a commander in the forests, demonstrating immense courage, strategic genius, and an unwavering dedication to liberation from British colonial oppression. He was captured in 1956 after being wounded.
And executed by the colonizers in 1957. He was just 37 years old.
Just 37.
And the historical indignity. The source material emphasizes that the ultimate betrayal came not only from the colonial powers, but from the independent government that followed.
Precisely. The Kenyatta government, the very regime that inherited the independence Kimathi fought and died for, showed absolute, deliberate indifference.
They refused to even search for his unknown grave.
4 decades. And refused to officially honor him as a national hero. The source uses this as a stinging indictment. The independent nation chose to honor collaborators and opportunists.
While actively discarding the memory of the true anti-colonial heroes who sacrificed everything for genuine liberation.
And he wasn't alone. We hear about General Wariyama, also in his 20s, and countless other young Kenyans who paid the ultimate price, fighting for an independence that the current, older generation simply stepped into positions to exploit.
This history, it provides the necessary moral weight to the current Gen Z movement.
It establishes that they are not starting a new fight. They are finishing an ancient one, reclaiming a nation stolen from the heroes who paid the ultimate price for it. It strips away any moral standing the older political class might claim to have.
With that moral mandate established, let's return to the present. The stark reality check. The current crisis is inextricably linked to the quality of leadership and advice at the highest levels.
Right. And the source material focuses on the immense, often unaccountable influence surrounding the head of state. It specifically cites individuals like Farouk Kibet,
Who, despite holding no formal elected government position, reportedly wields enormous policy-shaping power.
It creates a deeply concerning shadow government dynamic where advice and direction are given without public scrutiny or accountability.
And then there's Oscar Sudi, an MP whose documented educational credentials are noted as questionable, yet he is positioned to advise on complex, critical national policies.
Policies that require significant expertise. The conclusion here, unavoidable in the source material, is that quality governance is impossible when counsel is driven by personal loyalty and questionable competence rather than expertise or integrity.
The sources argue that corruption flows directly from the top.
It has to. When the highest office tolerates or encourages this kind of environment, the entire national bureaucracy is given license to devolve into chaos and self-enrichment.
And we can connect this corruption and poor leadership directly to the destruction of the economy. The sources provide some hard data that should deeply alarm every young Kenyan.
The data confirms the scale of the catastrophe. Youth unemployment stands at a devastating 47%.
47%. Nearly half of young, able-bodied, often educated Kenyans are actively seeking work and cannot find it.
It's a monumental failure of leadership, translating directly into national instability and despair.
And compounding this, the poverty rate sits at 36%. Over a third of Kenyans live below the poverty line.
And we can link this human suffering directly to the financial drain of corruption. The estimated annual loss, according to the sources, is a staggering $1.2 billion.
A billion with a B every single year.
Every year. This isn't just budget leakage. This is systemic theft on a national scale.
To put that $1.2 billion figure into context for our listeners, what could that money actually build if it were protected?
The impact would be immediate and transformative. It could fund thousands of clean water systems, ensuring millions get access to safe water. It could establish hundreds of community health centers and adequately staff them.
It could hire tens of thousands of newly graduated teachers and nurses.
Exactly. Instead, it's siphoned off through inflated budgets and phantom contractors, directly ensuring that necessary infrastructure and jobs are never, ever created.
The result, what the sources call the delivery of fools in power, is systemic chaos and failure.
You see a complete lack of coherent national strategy. Ministries operate like independent competing entities because their main objective is private gain, not national synergy. Every government project is used as a tool to loot.
And the ultimate tragedy is the destruction of public institutions and the crushing of hope. The entire system is structurally designed to benefit a small, entrenched group at the expense of everyone else. I trust you're enjoying this deep dive and learning a lot. Understanding these historical patterns and the sheer depth of the current crisis is step one, but action is step two. The knowledge we've just unpacked is the fuel for change.
It is. And before we move on to the strategic action plan laid out in the source material, let's take a moment to make sure you have the tools to convert this knowledge into action.
This is urgent. The movement wants you to download this free ebook and audio. It's called Kenya's Gen Z Must Reclaim Their Power. Remember, it is absolutely free.
The point is to read it or listen to it, take action, and tell your friends. You can go to oneofnotam.com, create an account, and download the free ebook and audio.
Again, it is free E. Take action. Freedom never comes easy. The question is, what will you do?
And for more great resources, including titles that dive deeper into the history we just discussed, you can visit beacons.aa 2020 buy books.
And remember, this movement requires participation right where you are. You can start changing Kenya right now. Create your account and start posting your comments at wantamnotam.com.
You can also join the discussion on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Kenya Pietuko Pamoja.
And if you're listening at home, in the office, or on the road, in private cars, buses, matatus, continue to listen and enjoy the KWM podcast right here at rss.com. Podcasts Kenya Wantam Notam Movement, KWM. This knowledge is your fuel.
Now that brings us to a really critical mindset shift required to move forward, and that's the idea of decentralizing change.
Yes. The cultural assumption for decades has been that genuine political change has to start in Nairobi. That's where the central power is. But the source material challenges this directly. It says, in one word, wrong.
And the core argument is brilliant in its simplicity.
Yeah.
Change does not begin with the politicians. It begins where you live.
This is a fundamental challenge to the tradition of centralized power. It recognizes that if the movement is decentralized, it becomes impossible for the establishment to contain or neutralize it with a single action.
Right. And the power of this strategy lies in achieving accountability through shared local information.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when citizens start sharing specific local details about what happens in Turkana or Makwini or Kisumu or Nyeri, a national pattern emerges.
People start realizing, wait a minute, the same tricks, the same hands are operating here that are operating hundreds of kilometers away.
Exactly. This national pattern recognition reveals that the system is rotten uniformly, not just limited to a few big national scandals. That is how true accountability begins. Not with national inquiries, but with ordinary people refusing to be fooled twice at the local level.
This shared documentation effort leads directly to what the source calls the People's Record.
Yes.
And it stresses this platform is not intended to be another news site that just reacts to government spin.
Absolutely not. It is a rigorous documentation effort. Every comment, every local truth shared on there forms an undeniable factual trail that no spin doctor, no complicit state media outlet can erase or successfully dispute.
It's history being written in real time by those who are actually living through these governance failures.
It is. So the call to action for you, the listener, here is very detailed. Share your stories.
They want specifics.
Yes. What is happening or what's not happening in your area? Who is doing something right with local funds? Who keeps promising, stealing the money, and then vanishing?
Tell it as it is. No filters, no political spin.
Your honesty serves as a beacon. It informs the network. And, critically, it wakes up the next person who might be apathetic or unaware.
That is how a movement grows, one honest post at a time. The sources stress that all 47 counties are listed on the platform. The listener is urged to identify their county and start sharing their ideas.
Ideas that can help change their local village, their city, and ultimately the nation. The movement must be grassroots or it will fail.
This strategy completely flips the power dynamic. The establishment controls the national narrative.
But by creating a distributed, factual people's record, Gen Z bypasses the state-controlled media entirely and ensures that the truth about local realities is universally documented.
Now we move to the final and most crucial strategic section, defining the path forward. And given the systemic corruption we've detailed, the source material takes a very hard, evidence-based look at the utility of traditional elections.
It calls elections an illusion. And this conclusion is drawn from empirical evidence observed in specific recent contests.
It cites the by-elections in Mbir and Malava as prime examples of a system that is systemically compromised. What was the documented evidence of fraud they cited?
The sources cite widespread distribution of money to voters immediately before polling, visible ballot box tampering after polls closed.
And the announcement of final results that were statistically nonsensical, they clearly overrode the will of the local voters.
The cynical reality, according to the source, is that the entrenched establishment does not rely on genuine democratic processes to maintain power. They rely on maintaining the appearance of democracy,
while ensuring the real mechanisms of power money, manipulation, and coercion are always operational.
So elections, therefore, serve primarily to legitimize the status quo without delivering real structural change for the population.
So if elections are compromised, the conclusion is clear. Sustained activism and street pressure must matter more than the ballots alone.
This is the critical strategic pivot. When the electoral process is rigged, mass mobilization is the only language the establishment understands. Sustained, organized street pressure creates a constant political headache and economic disruption that can force a response when a simple vote count cannot.
And this activism needs to be strategic, nonviolent, but relentless.
Exactly. holding leaders accountable between elections, not just during the brief campaign period.
But activism needs to be channeled toward new leadership, and the call here is very specific. Kenya needs leaders in their 30s.
The argument for this generational change is powerful. It demands bringing in fresh minds who have grown up in the digital age and, crucially, have not been corrupted by decades spent in a broken patronage system.
Visionary leaders who see what a modern, clean Kenya could become.
Unburdened by the crippling habits of the past.
So what are the specific, tangible contrasts between the old guard and these potential Gen Z leaders that make them more suitable?
Well, firstly, a massive asset. They have a clean slate. They are free of the corruption scandals that haunt the current old guard. No history of theft dating back to the Moi or Kenyatta I eras.
Secondly, they're digitally native.
Right. They understand modern governance. They can leverage technology for transparent public spending and accountability mechanisms the analog old guard cannot possibly implement effectively.
And the third, and most critical element, they fundamentally understand the suffering of the youth because they've lived it.
They are the generation living under 47% unemployment. They bear the burden of crippling education debt and a broken healthcare system. This lived experience means their policy agenda is focused on tangible solutions.
Unencumbered by old tribal calculations or political debts.
Their motivation is integrity and service, not patronage.
This clarity of purpose leads directly to what the source calls Gen Z's 5-point mandate. These are the detailed marching orders for taking power. Let's break these down.
The first point is fundamental, about establishing moral autonomy. Reject the old guard completely.
This means practical, organized disengagement. Stop attending their rallies, stop amplifying their messages on social media, cut off the psychological and political fuel that keeps their corrupt machine operational.
When they speak, tune them out. Refuse to grant them legitimacy.
The second point is about rigorous selection. Identify young leaders worth supporting. This requires moving beyond simplistic popularity.
Right. Look for candidates in their 30s with proven, verifiable track records.
Yeah.
People who have successfully led community projects, built legitimate businesses, or demonstrated unwavering long-term integrity. The focus has to be on service delivery and character, not just rhetoric.
Number 3 addresses the economic architecture of politics. Build alternative power structures.
This means creating networks that operate entirely outside traditional party-controlled politics, which are universally beholden to wealthy, corrupt sponsors.
This source urges activists to fund campaigns through thousands of small democratic donations from ordinary citizens.
This microfunding strategy ensures that when a young leader is elected, their loyalty is decentralized. It's to the community of citizens who contributed, not to a single wealthy individual expecting massive contracts in return.
Fourth, and this connects back to the importance of the street, they must maintain pressure through activism.
The key is continuity. They must keep protesting, keep demanding transparent budgets, and keep organizing resistance between election cycles. The goal is to make the entire 5-year term a continuous period of accountability.
So any looting that occurs is immediately met with documented exposure and organized resistance.
Exactly. And finally, the most direct challenge, which requires the most courage. Run for office yourselves.
The mandate is highly specific and targeted. Gen Z needs to fill the positions of Member of County Assembly, MCA, Member of Parliament, MP, and Governor.
Yes. The MCA controls local budgets. The MP influences national legislation. The governor manages vast, devolved budgets. If Gen Z strategically fills these core governance roles now, they begin taking control of the key mechanisms of resource allocation.
Paving the way for eventual national leadership.
If you want a clean system, you must be the clean person sitting in the chair.
This deep dive shows that Kenya stands at a critical, stark turning point. The choice, as articulated by the sources, is undeniably binary and immediate.
The path of least resistance is to allow the old guard to continue recycling themselves, continuing the systematic looting and corruption until there is nothing of economic value left to steal.
Driving that 47% unemployment rate and 36% poverty rate even higher.
The other choice is to fight back, to reclaim the moral authority demonstrated on June 25th, and to deploy the unity, the numbers, the energy, and the digital savvy that the establishment fears the most.
The power equation is unequivocally in Gen Z's favor.
What is needed now is the sustained strategic will to use all of it. Power, the source emphasizes, will never be handed over willingly. It must be taken.
Not through violence, but through organized, relentless, and strategic political action that pressures the system until it fundamentally reforms.
The final, overarching goal the historical debt we discussed, is to honor the young freedom fighters, Kariuki, Mboya, Kimathi, who died so Kenya could be free.
The only way to honor them is to finish what they started, building a nation that serves its people, that protects its resources, and that rewards service, not self-enrichment.
This is your country. The tools are available. The mandate is clear. The record of failure is documented. The time for action is now.
I trust you have been enjoying this deep dive and learning a lot. Remember, this knowledge is your fuel.
And remember the strategy we discussed. Many Kenyans think change begins in Nairobi. Wrong. It begins where you live. When citizens share what happens in Turkana, Makueni, Kisumu, or Nyeri, patterns appear. The same tricks, the same hands.
That's how accountability begins, not with titles, but with ordinary people refusing to be fooled twice.
And this platform, wantamnotum.com, it's not a news site. It's a people's record. Every comment, every truth written there forms a trail that no spin doctor can erase.
When you post, you're not just reacting, you're documenting Kenya as it is. History isn't written in offices anymore. It's written here, by you.
So we want your stories. What is happening or what's not? Who is doing something right? Who keeps promising and vanishing? Tell it as it is. No filters, no spin. Your words can wake up the next person to act.
That is how a movement grows, one honest post at a time. All 47 counties are listed there. Identify your county and start posting, sharing your ideas that can help change your village, your city, and your nation.
Okay, one more time. Here's that urgent call to action.
Urgent. Download this free ebook audio. Kenya's Gen Z must reclaim their power. Remember, it is free. Read or listen to it. Take action. And please tell your friends to go to wantamnotum.com.
They just need to create an account and download the ever-free ebook and audio. Again, it is completely free. Take action. Freedom never comes easy. The question is, what will you do?
For more great resources, you can also visit beacons.aak 2020 buy books.
These resources really provide the deep background you need to fully engage in this movement.
There's ebook 1. We must never forget these Kenyan heroes. It is a raw account of those who fought for justice and paid with their lives. It reminds us that real patriots never wore power suits. They carried courage.
And ebook 2. Kenya after Kenyatta. The Empire of Looters. It's a sharp look at how every subsequent regime turned betrayal into policy. It's the story no classroom dared to teach, written for those who still care enough to be angry.
There is also ebook 3, The Betrayal of Uhuru, Land, Looting, and the Legacy of Kenyatta's Kenya.
So please buy or download these ebooks. Read them, share them, talk about them. Let them push you to speak louder, question harder, and expose deeper. The future doesn't belong to the quiet.
Change Kenya. Start commenting and posting. Create your account and start posting your comments at https.wantamnotum.com.
Listen and enjoy the KWM podcast anywhere you are. At home, the office, on the road, in cars, buses, matatas. At https.rss.com. Podcast Kenya Wantam Notum Movement KWM.
And please join the discussion on our Facebook page, https.www.facebook.com/Kenyampia Tukapamoja.
Thank you for listening to the Kenya Wantam Movement KWM podcast.